The best Yunara build isn't something I can give you in one screenshot. Kraken can be right in one game and C44 or Yun Tal in another. And sometimes your first recall should change your build plan completely. I'm Gunfire. I mained Yunara since she came out and I hit Challenger playing her. I also spent a lot of time testing different builds on stream and some worked while some definitely didn't. In this guide, I will show you the options I actually trust when I choose each one and examples from my own games when those choices mattered. We will get through runes and summer spells quickly, then jump into practice tool and build everything from first recall to situational items. Let's start with runes. This is the typical Yunara rune page. You can have bloodline over alacrity, but I highly suggest this rune because it helps you win your lane easier. Also, if you are building C44, that attack speed is a must. You can play Yun Tal with bloodline, but I also suggest playing Kraken Slayer with alacrity. And those 3 runes are always the same, don't change those. And for your secondary, you usually play inspiration and you play around these 3 runes. I usually play with cashback plus triple tonic, but I can also play with cosmic insight a lot, because if I'm playing against assassins or dive champions such as Vi, Nocturne, I really want to have a shorter cooldown on my flash or barrier. That's why I have cosmic insight. And if I'm playing for Yun Tal, I have to play with triple tonic because the level 3 potion gives 60 gold and it kind of secures or helps you get the BF sword earlier. You can also play with resolve secondary against aggressive lanes, like you have enchanter support and they have Nautilus Lucian. I would like to have those runes for example, but I usually play like this. For my spells, I usually play with barrier and flash, but you can also take Cleanse, Exhaust or Ghost. Ghost is great if the matchup is easy. Exhaust is great into ADCs that all-in you, such as Tristana or Samira. And if you are forced to take Cleanse, go for it. If you are playing a spell that is different than barrier, I will suggest having Cosmic Insight because all of these 3 runes have 240 second cooldowns, so Cosmic Insight helps a lot with the cooldown. Alright, now let's start with the starting items. Yunara has 3 different options. Let's start with Doran's Blade because this is the shortest. If you want to all-in level 1, Doran's Blade is better because it gives you health and AD, so if the enemy ADC has debuff, you're gonna survive longer because of the extra health. Do it only if you feel like you're gonna hard all-in level 1. Otherwise, you usually start with Doran's Bow because it's the most consistent one. Attack speed helps you a lot with playing aggressively or taking CS. But sometimes you have to start with Doran's Helm, which many of you don't. Like, I highly suggest playing Doran's Helm if the matchup is not great. Like, let's say the enemy support is Nautilus and my support is Zeal. I think it's best to have Doran's Helm against those and survive their hook. Otherwise, you are too squishy without it. Like, look at this. It gives you 150 health and some armor magic resist. So it's also great against ADCs that do hybrid damage on you, such as Kai'Sa or Ezreal. Let's talk about boots too. I always go Omnivamp boots because they are extremely broken on Yunara right now. I mean, they are broken on pretty much any ADC that has AoE damage, such as Zeri, Jinx, Yunara. So building these boots are really good. I don't suggest Berserkers because even though they are buffed recently, it's still not enough. I would only consider building Berserkers if I'm playing against really annoying poke matchup like Xerath ADC and Karma support for example, so that I get to rush my tier 2 boots and I also get some offensive stats, 30% attack speed. But I don't suggest it. Like, you can go Omnivamp boots at least 95% of your games. And let's say that you're playing against aggressive ADC like Tristana and they have AD assassins or they have AD champions overall on the enemy team. You can always go Steel Caps. Okay, now let's talk about the first recall. Let's say that you want for a BF sword recall, but you only had 1.2k gold. It means that you can take other components of Yun Tal like this, maybe even boots, but if you do that, you're gonna be extremely weak compared to the enemy ADC. To spend your gold wisely, you might have to change your build. It depends on the lane, like if the enemy ADC is chilling and the matchup is fine, you can still go for Yun Tal and you can commit to it. But if it's not an easy scaling game, either convert to C44 or Kraken. If you're gonna go for C44 and you have 1.2k gold, you can just get pickaxe and longsword. But if you are going for Kraken Slayer, you can take recurve bow into longsword for example. But if you just recall for like 500 gold, you can always get Cal. I just don't suggest it if you have around 1k gold. It's fine until 700ish gold. So if it's before minute 5, I would say I could suggest Cal, otherwise it's too late. But usually I don't build Cal a lot because I rather rush my first item. Now let's talk about Kraken Slayer components. I think this is the best one because for 700 gold, it means that double longsword money, you get 15 bonus physical damage passive, and you also have 15% attack speed. So you lose 5 AED compared to double longsword, but you have 15% attack speed. So it really helps Yunara. So I would rather get this, Axe second, Rectrix third. But if I'm playing against or like poke matchup in general, like Xerath, Ezreal, I would rather get this either first or second. For C44, obviously you should get the AD ones first. If you can afford, always go for pickaxe first, then double longsword, then finish your Noonquiver and finish your item. And obviously you have to take your BF sword for Yun Tal, otherwise it's so punishing to build this item. Now that we covered the first recall, let's compare the first item choice. Kraken Slayer is the most popular one, and it gives you the strongest power spike when you first build the first item. So if you are playing against aggressive ADCs such as Tristana, Kai'Sa, Samira, Kraken Slayer is really solid. And if your jungle also plays around you a lot, so there is always 3 versus 3 fights, you should go for Kraken Slayer because you're gonna be stronger. But if you want a slower scaling, but when you scale you're gonna get a good power spike, go for Yun Tal. When you commit to Yun Tal, the building path is really hard, and also when you finish the item, you don't have any crit yet, so even though when you finish it's the weak item, but when you finally stack the crits chance, it's such an overtuned item right now. Like, it's such a gold efficient item when you get the crit. But C44 on the other hand, it's a cheaper item and it instantly gives you the stats. The only downside is that if the enemy team goes melee range on me, like for example, I do less damage when I'm melee range on them. So if the enemy team goes melee range on me, my DPS is gonna be short. So I prefer C44 against range comps. So if I play against melee comps, I either go Kraken or Yun Tal, it depends. Another problem with C44 is that you lack attack speed compared to these two, so you need to play with alacrity all the time. But when you get used to alacrity plus C44, it's not that hard, you just need to adapt to this build. When you get your Zeal item, it's fine, but when you first get the item, you're gonna feel a bit slower. The reason I go C44 in most of my games is that it's a cheaper item and it gets me the fastest power scale. Yun Tal gives me a slow but a strong power scale. C44 gives me a fast but a weaker scale than Yun Tal. Meanwhile, Kraken gives me a really slow scale but a fast power spike. When I get my Zeal item, I feel like C44 does the biggest damage compared to Kraken or Yun Tal. I feel like C44 plus a Zeal item beats Kraken or Yun Tal plus a Zeal item. Okay, now compare the Zeal items. After the buffs, Runaan is extremely strong right now, so I suggest building Runaan in at least 90% of the games. If you are playing against poke champions, you can just go Phantom Dancer. Like, if I see Xerath and he is annoying, I can always go Phantom Dancer. But I don't build Phantom Dancer for its attack speed, I build it for the movement speed. And the thing about Fiendhunter is that when I activate my ult, it's also gonna reduce my E and W cooldowns. It's 9 seconds right now. When I press R, my E is 6.92 seconds. It means that I get to cast my E and W one additional time if I build Fiendhunter. So if I'm playing against aggressive assassins or dive champions such as Nocturne, Vi, even Nautilus ult, I would love to have Fiendhunter because I'm gonna be able to use my dash during the team fights faster. I will also have shorter ult cooldown, so sometimes Nautilus ults me and I have to use my ult, just like an ult trade, and when I do that, my ult cooldown is really long if I don't have this item. And let's talk about Runaans. There is only one weak problem about Yun Tal, that is the isolated fights. Like, if there is nobody nearby to the target that I'm hitting, I don't utilize any passive. But let's say that he had somebody behind him, I get a really good amount of damage with my Q bounces. It's a situational item, but I feel like after the buffs, it's so consistent even though it's still a situational item. But Runaan is really good against champions with spam units such as Naafiri, Malzahar W, Ares spiders, Yorick ghouls, because when you activate your Q, with Runaans you get to one-shot those units easily, and it means that they're gonna lose really big amount of DPS, and at the same time, because of the bounces, you're gonna do additional damage on them. So I really love having Runaans against those champions. Let's talk about armor pen items as well. Obviously, LDR is great against HP champions, but let's say I'm not gonna be able to utilize my 15%. Like, let's say they don't have any HP stackers, like the enemy team is squishy, or at least they don't have high HP champions like Sion. I would rather have Terminus or Mortal Reminder in that case. If my team doesn't build anti-heal, sadly I must be that guy that goes for Mortal Reminder. Like, let's say they have Aatrox or Soraka, yeah, I'm gonna go Mortal Reminder. Otherwise, I'm gonna go Terminus. But I don't suggest Terminus with Kraken Slayer, which I will talk about that in a moment. Let's start with full builds right now. Let's start with Kraken build. When I build Kraken, I go Kraken into Zeal item all the time, and I choose between these three based on what I need against the enemy comp. But Fiendhunter does better overall with Kraken Slayer. The reason is that you don't have any crit with your first item, but when you get Fiendhunter, you get 3 guaranteed crit shots. And this item is also great against squishies, so if I want to stat check a squishy champion 1v1, Fiendhunter is great. And since I have no crits with my Kraken Slayer, and I usually play Kraken Slayer for snowballing, if I want to snowball, I go Kraken Slayer into Fiendhunter. Then you need to make a good decision with your next items. You can get C44 third, but if you do that, you have to delay your Infinity Edge or LDR into your 5th item. Let's say you go Infinity Edge 4th, LDR 5th. The problem is that if the enemy top laner is something like Ornn and he's extremely tanky, you can't play front to back because you're gonna lack damage until your 5th item. So in that case, I would go Infinity Edge 3rd, LDR 4th, and C44 5th. And the last item is situation, like it could be any item above here, like if I need QSS, it's gonna be QSS, or Zonya against some unavoidable engage like Vi ult, or some assassins like Rengar. I also like GA overall. Like, you don't need more life steal because you already have Omnivamp boots, but you can always have more life steal, like it's not a bad thing. So you can get BT as last item. And this is a typical Kraken Slayer build. Now let's talk about Yun Tal build. So if I don't have any problem building BF Sword on my first recall, I can go Yun Tal. When I first build it, I'm gonna be weak, unless if I have a support that enchants me like Lulu Pixie, because with the Lulu Pixie, I'm gonna proc the Pixie a lot with the high attack speed. So after Yun Tal, I can skip my Zeal item and go Infinity Edge C44 LDR. But I don't suggest this. I feel like Yunara should always play with a Zeal item. So I go Runaan into Infinity Edge, LDR. Last two items are situational. You can go BT and GA, or like anything here, just like Kraken Slayer. You can go something like Rabadon and Zonya, for example. Like, if your team lacks AP damage, you can even do that. That's not a bad buy, because Yunara passive, Yunara Q and W scales with AP a lot, so you don't lose damage. And if the enemy team is building armor, it's really great. And if they have annoying AP champions like Evelynn, you can get Koenig. If they have more than one crit champions, Ranus is fine. And Jackshaw is great for both AD and AP mixed comps. Endless Hunger can be good for the ability haste, so do it only if your build is full AD items, such as this. Because now you have so much AD, it gives you so much ability haste, and because of that, your dash is gonna be really short. But it's such a rare situation that this item is gonna be good. Now C44 build, which is my favorite build. I go C44 into Zeal, which is usually either Runaan or Fiendhunter, but after the buffs, I love Runaan so much. After that, I go Infinity Edge, and I either finish my crit with LDR or get Terminus. I really love Terminus in this build because it compensates the lack of attack speed from C44. And Yunara also does 65% physical, 35% magic damage, so the magic penetration also helps a lot with Yunara's damage. After that, if the enemy team has annoying unavoidable engage like Camille ult or Vi ult, I can always go Zonyas. Otherwise, I will get shield bow for my last crit item. And if I don't need Zonyas, it could be anything here like BT. The reason I like C44 build is that it's really easy to build. This item is cheap, and after getting C44 and Zeal, you can build pretty much anything, like you have so much option. But when you build Kraken, for example, you already delay your crit with first item. So if you get Terminus, it means that you're gonna delay your crit even harder, So you're gonna sit at 50% crit when you have 4 items. And that's usually not good on Yunara. Like you can sometimes sit at 75 in your full build, but 50% is a bit too low. And I highly suggest Yunara players to play with Zhonyas because this item saves me against so many stuff that I would normally die against. Before I end the video, here's a shorter version. If you want Yunara's strongest first item power spike, go Kraken Slayer. If you're okay with a slightly weaker first item for a stronger scaling, go C44. Yun Tal has the slowest early game, but becomes extremely strong once it's fully stacked. When I can consistently hit multiple targets, Hurricane is my main Zeal item. And Phantom Dancer is for isolated fights or movement speed. Fiendhunter is for games where the alt cooldown and additional E-dash matters more. For penetration, Alder is for health stack and tanks, and Mortar Reminder is for games where your team is anti-heal, and Terminus fits the C44 build when you want attack speed. Terminus also gives you mixed penetration and additional durability. The main thing I want you to take from this guide is not to copy the same 6 items every game. Choose your first 2 items based on the game, then use your remaining slots to answer whatever is stopping you from either dealing damage or surviving. In my next Yunara guide, I will talk about mechanics and important tricks, along with how I play laning phase and team fights. After that, I'm planning a complete matchup guide for Yunara. If you want to ask me anything live, I stream almost every day on Twitch at Gunfire ADC. And if there is a situation or a question that you want to ask about the build, leave the enemy comp in the comments. And thanks for watching.